If we can supply a flow of leads, which we knew we could check that box, we could then manage the business and figure out how to create opportunity for our team so they could continue growing and we could continue adding other team members.
Well, hello and welcome to the J. Sterling Hughes Show, where we share the straight truth on how we are scaling a family law practice from 0 to 25 attorneys today and doing over $15 million in revenue. And my purpose here is to document what's working and what's not working with hopes that you can take that and you can recontextualize that in your practice and shorten your success curve. Well, my guest is a returning guest today, my partner, Tony Karls. Tony and I founded Sterling Law together way back in 2014. So we're going up on 10 years here very soon, Tony.
Yep.
And we wanted to talk today about what we call our business thesis, our law firm thesis when we first started. So taking us back, Tony, I remember you and I had a lot of conversation about law firm versus another business that we were considering in roofing of all things. And we settled on the law firm because we felt like there were some advantages for us that would give us a competitive advantage going forward. And so the impetus for us having those conversations, as you might remember, was I remember telling you the story about the 2008 business that I had started called Nationwide Home Improvement. And that business was all about driving leads for roofers and for window people and for siding people for homeowners. So we would get the homeowner that would be interested in one of those three services, and we would pass that information on to one of those contractors, and they would pay us for that privilege. Well, 2008 was a really tough year, especially Q3 for the building world and for the economy at large. And so that business ultimately just crashed and burned in early part of 2009 to my chagrin. But later that year, I had a meeting with my mentor, Bobby Martin, and I was lamenting, going over everything that had happened in a negative way to that business, licking my wounds. And he asked me, he said, Jeff, what were the things that you could rely on that would give you a competitive advantage? What were your skills, your opportunities that no other competitor had that you could win at? And I really had struggled to name more than one, I think. And that was shaky. And so when we started Sterling Law back in 2014, we settled on what we felt were like our two big advantages over the competitors that we felt like we could really deliver on.
Yeah.
And Bobby told me that it was good to have one, but it was great to have two. So can you just share with our audience here those two things that we felt like were our business thesis, our law firm thesis for our competitive advantage?
Yeah. The first one was how we thought about the space as it relates to who was operating the businesses and executing different portions of it. So if you think about a family law firm, most of them are small, most of them are a couple people, which means a lawyer who's really good at servicing clients and understands the law and understands what to do in the courtroom also has to be great at marketing, which is a pretty hard pull. I know a lot about marketing and I know nothing about law. And I've met a lot of attorneys that know a lot about law and what happens there. And they think they know stuff about marketing, but they know nothing about marketing. We had an advantage of getting really punched in the face in the space we were in. We're in a highly competitive affiliate marketing space prior to that. And we were able to bring that expertise of running a large team to really be masters at marketing to a space where the people we were competing against didn't have that advantage. Or if they did, because they outsourced it, they had to pay exponentially more for it than we would have to because we bring it into the business.
So digital marketing, I remember having lots of discussions. I said, if we're going to put all of our eggs in this basket, let's really, really watch this basket and dominate online with digital marketing. And so that was our first part of our thesis, our competitive advantage. And that's something that you are world-class in, if I can brag for you a little bit. And so on a high level, walk through how you went about building that advantage for us before we get into our second part of our thesis.
We spent the bulk of our time is really understanding what drove user behavior online and how that functionally worked in a local space, because we were in a B2C national space, which functions differently than a B2C local space. Our first objective was to figure out the nuance there. It was going to be similar but different because it's still lead gen, but it was local versus national. And so we spent a lot of time figuring that out. While we were figuring it out, Google did some updates with their search and gave us opportunities to appear in the maps. We really went and studied that. We hired several consultants to get really deep dives into it. They all gave us their different opinions. None of them matched. So what I did is I took all four of their perspectives and mashed them together and tested what they thought was true and kind of came up with our playbook and what we did. And then then we did it over and over and over again until we actually like became real masters. And I remember when we were starting and we weren't, and we had both our Madison branch and our Milwaukee branch, and we would flip-flop between like which branch was getting leads, and it would, if it was Milwaukee, Madison wasn't, and then Madison was, and now Milwaukee wasn't, and what the heck is going on? And it's because we didn't truly understand local, multi-business local, which is very different than single business local or single location local, and figuring out all the nuances there and how Google worked and how people responded, and how drive time matters, and all of the significantly different components that actually dictate whether or not someone who's looking to kind of move through a really excruciating portion of their life would choose us versus somebody else, or at least have visibility of us versus somebody else.
Yeah. I remember, Tony, in those early years, we were doing so well online. We can get clients, we got their attention, and things were really humming along. And I remember you and I having a lot of conversation around the fact that we had to keep strong here because we were making so many other mistakes in the actual running of the business. And so having a constant flow of clients that we could serve gave us so much margin for error that we consumed in its entirety in all of our other mistakes that we weren't good at, the things that we really had to learn to manage and build a law firm in a way that would serve clients and take care of our team. So that part of our thesis certainly has stood up over the past 10 years. And it has given us the advantage that we've enjoyed up to this day, in a time that if we didn't have it, we would have been dead in the water, no doubt about it. So with that first part of our thesis, moving into that second, describe what was the second part of the competitive advantage that we felt like we could bring to bear in the family law and the people law space.
Similar to the first one, most of our competitors we knew we were going to be competing against had smaller businesses. They didn't necessarily know how to grow or think about growing because it was essentially they owned their job. They were a professional that built a business off of their reputation, and it's really hard to scale that. Before social media and content marketing that exists today, which still isn't really applied well in this space, there wasn't really an opportunity to scale that. So businesses would grow, you get to a certain point, the other associates that are in the firm would also do that thing, and then they would be dissatisfied with their scenario, and they would spin out because the owner of the business was essentially managing their reputation and their referrals, and they weren't really building a business. So they were owning it. What we thought about is if we can supply a flow of leads, which we knew we could check that box, we could then manage the business and figure out how to create opportunity for our team so they could continue growing, and we could continue adding other team members so that we could develop them in their careers and actually give them a career path versus manage your referrals. Obviously our team does that. They do good service, but that's in addition to what we do, not the primary.
So focusing on having a mindset of managing the firm like a business versus an individual practice, or even just more of a set of lawyers coming together to have their own job, I think was a major factor for us in moving forward. So in retrospect, looking back, there's nothing I would change about that thesis. It really proved out for us, wouldn't you say, over the past 10 years?
Yeah, and the more and more we leaned into those two things, the better we got. So traditionally, like when we started, we were doing a little bit of everything, which was a mistake. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's what most of these small firms do because they're built off their reputation. When we stopped doing that, what was difficult for us is we were going to build an expertise in one area. We said no to a lot of stuff. We still say no to a lot of stuff. So like that's something that most firms don't do, is most firms will say yes to lots of stuff because it's there, and not no, I'm only going to do this one thing well and become an expert in this one thing, which means a referral that comes to you, you're going to pass off to your colleague in the marketplace that's also playing the same game you are, which is building a business versus managing a reputation. You can manage your reputation through referrals and pass them off to great people that are good at one thing, and they'll do this to you.
Yeah, so thankful for you and for our partnership over the years and putting those two things together. And really my encouragement to anyone listening is if you're going to start a firm, build a firm, you need two things that you can execute exceedingly well, consistently year after year after year to give you that competitive advantage. And certainly is not going to be the same two for us. We were unique coming into this practice. in ways that many of our competitors weren't. They could beat us at other things like a drum, but those two things we felt like we could deliver on. And to our credit, despite our propensity to be distracted, we really stuck to those two things over the years, and it's borne out for us.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you. Appreciate you coming on the show today.
Yep. Thank you.